What does it take to become an Indian citizen? The government says a proposed new law offers a home for those fleeing religious persecution. But opponents say it excludes one group, Muslims, and undermines the country's secular identity. What will it mean for the constitution and India's future? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Hala Mohideen. A proposal that would bring sweeping changes to India's 64-year-old citizenship law is dividing politicians and activists and prompting charges of religious bigotry. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, says it offers a safe harbour to people around the region fleeing persecution. But opponents say the bill is anti-Muslim. Now, it would allow illegal migrants from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan to obtain Indian nationality if they are members of religious minorities in the countries they flee. That includes Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Christians, Sikhs and Parsees, but not Muslims. It follows earlier moves by Narendra Modi's government to strip millions of Muslims in the state of Assam of their Indian nationality. Well, critics say both measures undermine the secular principles of India's constitution. The new citizenship law still needs to be approved by the upper house of India's parliament. But we begin with this report from Anshul Vora in New Delhi.
Protests have been organised in several parts in the northeast of India and also in the national capital. These people are protesting against Indian government's Citizenship Amendment Bill and they call it discriminatory. The Indian government says it's only trying to protect religiously persecuted minorities who've come to India from countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. But political analysts question the government on its intentions. They ask if that indeed is the government's intention, then why not also welcome Rohingyas? Political analysts say that the Indian government from now on is going to be deciding who is and is not an Indian on the basis of religion, and that goes against the very idea of India, a secular India. Some of the people that we've spoken to here also say that the Indian constitution starts with we the people, not we the Hindus, not we the Muslims. So there's a sense among the Muslim community that they are now going to be targeted, that they would have to work really hard on proving that they in fact are Indian citizens. Experts say that this may take India even closer to being a Hindu nation and further away from a secular state.
Well, let's bring in our guests. From New Delhi by Skype, we're joined by Harsh Mander, Director of the Social Justice Advocacy Organisation Centre for Equity Studies in London, Ronan Lee, a visiting scholar at Queen Mary University of London, and from Sonipat in India, also by Skype, Sriram Chaulia, Professor and Dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. If I could start with you, Harsh Mander, what do you think about this bill, which has now passed the lower house of Parliament in India? Do you feel it's controversial?
It's not just controversial. It's probably the single most dangerous law for the survival of India as a secular democracy if it gets passed by Parliament. And I need to explain that a little bit. It's about belonging, and it's about who will have the right to have rights, that is what citizenship is ultimately about. And right through India's freedom struggle, Mahatma Gandhi led a struggle which was founded on the basic idea that India would belong to all those who believe that this is their country, and religion would be irrelevant to decide whether you are eligible for citizenship or not. This became much harder because the Muslim League demanded and finally carved out a nation based on religion, which was Pakistan. And their view was that this is not one but two nations. There's a Muslim Pakistan and a Hindu India. And therefore there was a great pressure. 1 million people had died in Hindu-Muslim riots. My own family was one of the many who had to cross the borders. But Mahatma Gandhi and the leadership of this country resolved that even whatever may have happened, India will remain a country which equally belongs to all its religious followers, people of different religious identities, and they would be equal citizens in every way. And we must remember that Muslims who have stayed on in India had a choice between religious Pakistan and secular India, and they chose secular India. And and today, what the BJP is doing is, in a sense, proving that that perhaps Muhammad Ali Jinnah was correct if they believe that India is fundamentally a nation of Hindus.
Okay.
It's terrifying.
But from this bill, does this bill strip nationality from Indians who are Muslim already, or is this Citizenship Amendment Bill, doesn't it just apply to those who are seeking to apply for citizenship in India?
No, see, this is combined with something called the National Register of Citizens, which we've seen unfold in Assam. What's extraordinary about that process is that the state assumes that you are not a citizen, and it is up to you to prove with documents that you are a citizen. And now, in a country which is largely rural, with illiterate people, with people haven't gone to school, we don't have birth certification period processes. People don't even know their dates of birth. You have to produce documents which show right from your ancestors that your ancestors were legal citizens of this country and you are linked to them. And this has caused enormous suffering. It's almost Kafkaesque what people have had to go through in Assam.
Okay.
So what we're basically saying is that if there'll be a national register of citizens across India, no other people of any other religious identity, even if they are undocumented, have nothing to worry. And this is repeatedly said, because it will be assumed that you are refugees and persecuted, and therefore you'll get citizenship. It is only Muslims who, if they're not able to produce these documents, which is quite likely, will then be will have no citizenship rights.
Okay, let me put those points to you, Sriram Chaulia. We've heard there that this Citizenship Amendment Bill is dangerous, in Harshmander's words, and he's also bringing in the controversy which is surrounding this this registry at the same time. What's your assessment of this bill that has been introduced, and how do you respond to those allegations that it's dangerous?
Well, it's completely unfounded. It's based on ideological hatred of our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, and his nationalistic vision for the country, and to project India as a savior of minorities across South Asia. What this bill purports to do is to try and correct a historical injustice that's being done to a lot of minority groups in these neighboring countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Just look at the statistics. Hindus were 23% of Pakistan after independence in 1947. Now they're less than 2% of the population. A lot of them have been facing, forcible conversions, assassinations, and ethnic cleansing, and they're looking for India to give them refuge and shelter. Sikhs in Pakistan, there used to be 40,000 of them in 2002, down to just 8,000 today. Hindus in Bangladesh, another country to our east, around 14% at the time of independence in 1971, now down to 9% and dwindling. Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan, the third neighbor, which is the purpose of this bill, 700,000 in the 1970s. Now Hindus and Sikhs are less than 7,000. So you look at the situation, there are a lot of jihadists and extremist groups in our neighborhood that are engaging in ethnic cleansing and genocidal campaigns against minorities. And all these countries are theocratic. Islam is a state religion, and there is no basis of persecution of Muslims in that country on the basis of religion alone, per se. There may be other, and India does host Muslim refugees for that fact. This is often ignored by the critics like Mr. Mandar. There are more than 40,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees who are currently in India, who have fled ethnic cleansing in Myanmar. We have nearly 20,000 Afghan Muslim refugees who have been here since the war started in the 1980s.
Okay.
And we continue to shelter them and give them liberal, refuge. So India, I think what we are trying to do through this Citizenship Amendment Bill is to, provide like a lighthouse or a beacon of hope for those who are in very, very dire circumstances. A lot of these countries, if either the regime is not persecuting minorities, then there are fundamentalist jihadist groups that are doing it.
Well,
And by the
Sriram
way,
Cholia, it's interesting that you bring up the point about the Rohingyas, because the Rohingyas would not be able to apply for citizenship under this bill.
No, they don't get citizenship, but they are not being deported either. There are more than 40,000 of them.
But why
in
would
India.
they not get citizenship if this is about... Because there seem to be cross purposes here. Either it's providing safe haven to persecuted people, or it's correcting a historical injustice.
Why is Bangladesh not giving them citizenship? Because this is a fresh exodus that has happened only in the last 10 years. There's a hope for them to return. But when it comes to the Afghans, they've been living in India for a long time. They're Muslims. They're well integrated. There's no issue at all. So, and for that matter, I want to clarify one more point. The population of Muslims as a whole in India is 200 million. It rose from 9% to 49% at the time of independence to 14% today. They're thriving, unlike in these neighboring countries where non-Muslims are under serious threat of extinction. Muslims in India are thriving. 9% of Indian Muslims voted for Mr. Modi's party in the general elections that just happened a few months ago. So I think a lot of this propaganda needs to be unpacked and needs to be countered, because this is not based on statistical and objective reality on the grassroots, where Muslims are thriving and doing well in this country, because India is the only place where the entire South Asia people who are facing persecution and fear and other kinds of discrimination have hope.
OK, let me put those points to Ronan Lee then. Ronan, how would you respond to this? Do you view this bill as controversial, or do you see this as correcting a historical injustice, as we heard from Sriram Cholia?
Well, it's obviously controversial. I mean, what's been proposed is a change to legislation that will provide a citizenship so long as you're not Muslim. And that's what's going to make it controversial. It's a step away from India's founding secular principles, and it's deeply concerning because of how specific it is. It doesn't include Sri Lanka. It doesn't include migrants from Myanmar. India shares a 1,600-kilometre long land border with Myanmar. There's been some talk already about genocide in the region. In fact, tomorrow, Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi will front the International Court of Justice to defend Myanmar against accusations of genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority. But the Rohingya Muslim minority who are persecuted in Myanmar would find absolutely no solace in India because of this legislation. And in fact, India's government has made efforts to deport those Rohingya who are living in India. I think that the legislation is concerning too because of the way it will affect Muslims feeling about how they should engage and can engage with the politics of India. It sends a strong signal that Muslims in the future might well find their rights further restricted. And the next step will surely be a nationwide register of citizens, very similar to what happened in Assam, and the victim groups there were, of course, the Muslims. OK,
Sriram Cholia, you don't appear to agree with that.
Hala, I'll just point out a couple of things. There are more than 20 million illegal Bangladeshi immigrants who have seeped through the porous border on the east of the country and have amalgamated into various states of eastern India. And it's a very controversial aspect. Locals feel outnumbered, but it's being encouraged by some of the left-leaning parties in that region, because they think that by naturalizing these illegal aliens, they can try and get their vote banks to in the name of minority protection. I think this is a big security challenge. The national security angle also needs to be understood. You see, there are groups like Harkatul Jihad-e-Islami, Huji, which are dreaded, internationally proscribed terrorist organizations. They recruit from some of these illegal migrants. So we have a right, every sovereign state has a right to distinguish between legitimate refugees who are facing fear of persecution
But we seem
because
to
of
be
their identity.
but we seem to be mixing a lot of things up together, mixing up Muslims with terrorism, with a legitimate and illegitimate refugee. It can't be all things to all men here. Either a state accepts that minorities are persecuted, it accepts all minorities, or it's difficult to just cherry pick. These Muslim refugees aren't welcome, but Hindu or Christian refugees are. And is this not where the problem lies, Sriram Cholia?
They don't face persecution. Hala, Muslims do not face persecution in any of these neighboring countries by virtue of their religion.
Well, they face persecution in Myanmar.
So it's an objective fact based on group identity which faces persecution from state or from radical jihadist groups in those countries.
Ronan Lee, you were trying to come in.
I think an example of...
Well, I mean, Muslims most certainly face persecution in Myanmar, a major neighbour of India, 1,600-kilometre long land border with India. And tomorrow, Myanmar's leader will be at the International Court of Justice because of that persecution. I think we're getting away from what's actually happening here, which is that this is a piece of legislation that, on the one hand, claims or is claimed to provide solace and protection for people who are persecuted. But on the other hand, it simply doesn't do that. And that's what I think worries so many people about this legislation. What its proponents say it does is not what the legislation in fact does.
OK, let me bring in Harsh Mandi here, because you also wanted to jump in on that point. Do you think this bill is flawed because it's looking at things in a religious context, or are there deeper problems with it?
No, I think that, firstly, there are some falsehoods in Mr. Sriram's claims. The Indian government has been sending back Rohingyas. Some of us have been part of petitions in the Supreme Court trying to say that you cannot send people back because they're facing genocidal situations. So it's not true that these 40,000 Rohingyas are welcomed in any way or supported in any way as refugees in this country. That's absolutely false. Secondly, this whole discourse of 20 million, there are different figures, Bangladeshis who have, swamped this country, and that Bangladeshi Muslim is equal to terrorist, is equal to a security threat. These are all very dangerous kinds of allegations to make. Our Home Minister has actually used the word termite, and it's a really frightening word because it gives us, he talks about infiltrators as termites who have to be crushed, and that brings back, terrifying memories of Rwanda, for instance, when you use that kind of discourse. After a process which was completely weighted against the minorities in Assam, how many people finally emerged? Even the process was a small spelling mistake was enough for you to be rejected, and you have an Arabic name which is rendered into Bengali, which is rendered into English, and then there's a change in spelling in two documents, and you're treated as a foreigner and you're sent to a detention center. After that entire process, we've had just less than 2 million people who were unable to prove their documents, and of them, only 400,000 or so are Muslim. So this whole discourse about hordes of Muslim immigrants flooding into India and being recruited by terrorist organizations is part of a very dangerous attempt to divide India on religious grounds. India has seen partition, it's seen fear, it's seen what it leads to ultimately with this kind of politics, and the politics of the ruling party is an extremely dangerous one, because India's problems are that the economy is now in a bad shape. There's highest levels of unemployment.
Okay.
Farmers are in distress. It is not that Muslims are coming in from different countries and are taking away our jobs and creating a security threat.
Well, let me put that to you, Sriram Cholia. What's the motivation behind this bill? What is the government hoping to achieve by introducing this bill? Is it going to address fundamental underlying problems in the country? What's the motivation behind excluding Muslims as a group from this citizenship legislation?
Well, first of all, Hala, as I said, it is to expand our soft power in the region as a refuge for those who are desperately needing, protection.
But only some of those who desperately need protection.
Secondly, the motivation, as I said, is national security. A number of these, and again, Harsh Mandar is exaggerating. I didn't say that all the 20 million are into terrorism. I did not equate all the Bangladeshi immigrants as terrorists. I said that some of them have joined radical jihadist groups. It's a fact that must be acknowledged. I mean, why should we hide behind political correctness when it comes to national security? And thirdly, I think India is actually proclaiming that it is an open space. I mean, look at the number of refugee communities we host. We host Tibetans, we have Sri Lankans, we have Rohingyas, we have Afghans, we have some Burmese from the ethnic majority of Myanmar who were persecuted during the democracy struggle, and so many others, and you look at the sense of hope that they have when they reach India and when they remain in India. India is the safe harbor, and that is the message we are sending. I think it enhances India's strength as our regional power. It gives us, people across these countries who are looking at bleak features to their very existence. Why is Harsh Mandar not talking about the minorities in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan? Aren't they not facing genocidal situation?
But that
Why are we not focusing on that?
But arguably that doesn't come under the Indian government's jurisdiction. We're in the dying minutes of this debate.
It is our responsibility in this region to maintain the safety and security of people. We want peace and brotherhood in this neighborhood, and that's not happening because there's consistent genocidal mindset and ethnic cleansing happening against minorities in these countries.
Let me put that to Ronan Lee. Ronan Lee, we're hearing from Mr. Choli that the motivation behind this bill is increasing soft power. Part of it is to increase soft power and to protect minorities. Would you agree that that's likely to happen?
That's not what the bill will do. I mean, I think the motivation for the bill is more likely to be political. I mean, this will play well with Hindu-nationalist voters. I mean, there's no question about that. They will feel that this is legislation that speaks to them. And that's a handy distraction from the state of India's economy. And that works for the ruling BJP. It worked for Narendra Modi during the last national election. He portrayed himself as a watchman, as someone who could be trusted on national security. And that minimised the focus on the economy. And I think what's at the core of this is domestic politics within India, and it's an opportunity to distract from the state of the economy.
OK, we only have a minute left, so if you could answer in one sentence, please. Harsh Mandar, what do you think, if this bill passes, what do you think the consequences of it be for India's secular nature?
See, India's secular character will be completely broken because 200 million people will now alone have to prove with consequences. They alone will have to prove that they are Indian citizens on the basis of documents that they will find it very hard to produce. There's so much panic among Muslim people across India today. I work with homeless people. They're saying we don't have any documents at all. What will happen to us? It is creating a sense of, not just second-class citizenship, but the danger of being stripped of citizenship rights and being locked up in detention centers, which are being set up all across the country.
Okay.
It's a terrifying situation.
OK, Sriram Cholia, quickly, if you would, what do you think this will say for the secular nature of the country and its constitution?
There are lies, and then there are statistics. I've given you the facts. They are actually unchallengeable, and the facts on the ground remain that India is the only democracy and the only secular country in this region that is able to absorb these people and give them a life of dignity. This is a major step forward for India's foreign policy and soft power in the region, and I believe that India's constitutional democracy is safe under Narendra Modi, and in fact, Muslims are actually moving in step with the current ruling party's agenda, and most of them appreciated. Muslim women were liberated through triple talaq bill recently. They voted for Mr. Modi, and I think he is fulfilling their hopes and aspirations with great vision.
Okay, and in a final sentence, Ronan Lee, where do we go from here?
Nowhere good. I don't think this will be positive for India as a whole, and it certainly won't be positive for India's Muslim minority.
Okay, and I'm afraid, gentlemen, we are out of time. This discussion will, of course, continue in the days and weeks to come. But for now, I would like to thank all my guests, Harshmander, Ronan Lee and Sriram Cholia. Thank you, too, for watching at home. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting the website, aljazeera.com. And to continue the discussion, head to social media. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story, or tweet me directly @Hala Mohideen. But for now, from me and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.